I want to thank Phil and Monica and Adria and the Writers Studio, W.W. Norton Company, who's been distributed Pushcart for decades and is a great publisher, one of the few great ones left. An honest bunch of people owned by their employees. John Baker, who's sitting over there in the place of honor, Publishers Weekly, helped me start the Pushcart Prize with great notices long time ago, John. Thank you so much. Dan Dolgen, my lawyer, who keeps me afloat and out of jail. And Rick Moody here is an old friend and actually took a chance and published his first novel, Garden State, with Pushcart so long ago. Thank you, Rick, for believing in me. So a little history, and then I'll get out of here. The history of the Pushcart was in 1972. I started the press. Ironically, I was an editor at Doubleday, then the largest publishing company in the world, 750 books a year. Weekends, I put together the Publish It Yourself Handbook, which told authors they didn't need such publishers at Doubleday. And Ananias Nin, Stuart Brand, Leonard and Virginia Woolf were in the book, and many others. It sold many copies. It was big news in those days. Now, do-it-yourself publishing, self-publishing is big news too, and I often worry that it's for the wrong reasons, because I don't think authors should be publishing their own stuff, except as a last resort. Often we get too excited because we know we're geniuses, absolutely. I knew I was a genius in college, and my first novel was going to be published, and I'd be on the front page of the Times Book Review when I was 21. But thank God I was disabused of that notion. So I think it may be a little bit too easy to get published now. You push a button and worldwide you're famous. Not so. If you're a writer, and I know we have many writers here, take my rule, which is put it in a drawer for a year and come back to the story, the novel, the poem, and see if you think it's any good or not. Do not be in a huge rush. Speed kills art. I just thought that up. I wanted to quote to you a few things from the introduction, which you might be able to read if you buy the book, but this is a bit of history which has taken place over the decades. And a few people have commented on the idea of the Pushcart Prize. For instance, Jane Ann Phillips wrote that the Pushcart writers form a continuum that forms what is to the country at large almost an underground knowledge. The knowledge is needed now. Writers have collectively edited the Pushcart Prize. These are the voices that are speaking now. Cynthia Ozick stated in another introduction, the American writing sound gives us our culture. And this, while it hasn't much to do with keeping talents warm for the big trade publishers, is precisely the nature of the Pushcart Prize. Tess Gallagher, wife of Ray Carver, considered small press writing and reading an effort which, while it asked for a generous involvement without promising fame or even a large readership, insisted at the same time, in the words of William Carlos Williams, that you got to try hard, and operates outside the trade publishing world of wins and gains, buying and selling. Finally, Russell Banks wrote, I don't care what they say about those large commercial presses and the so-called slicks, about their literature and the life of the mind. I know what they love, profit, dividends, and increase. Banks continued a good warning about the danger to small presses and writers from too much self-congratulation. Quote, I know about the dreck, the merely competent, and the self-indulgently incompetent, the reams of narcissistic self-expression that thrive in the pages of many small press magazines and books. So, over the decades, with the help of these writers and thousands of others, literary publishing has changed for the better. The point, do not despair about the present situation where truth is denigrated, facts depend on whatever power brokers say they are, and hype and celebrity seem to rule the national mind. Our struggle is worth it. We are not back in the era where non-commercial writers wrote for their desk drawers only. This is a quiet, true revolution. Let's keep it. Would you indulge me while I make a little tribute to my dog, Sedgwick? He died. It's the final part in the introduction to this volume. It has something to do with writing, I'm not sure what. But I end with a farewell to Sedgwick, our 11-year-old Portuguese water dog. I found Sedgy as a puppy advertised in the pages of a local Long Island newspaper. He was a ribbon-wrapped Christmas present from my wife, Jeannie. All kisses and wiggle and bounce. He was unacquainted with depression. Every day over his many years was an adventure for Sedgy. He was a handsome critter, mostly black and big, with a big white bow on his chest. His only threat was that he might destroy a stranger with kisses. He died after a furious round of play at the dog park with dogs half his age. This was just last November, a year ago. We word slingers could learn a bit from Sedgwick about wonder and love. Quitting for him was not an option. Think on these things in the current age. Dog is God spelled backward. That for me is not just a funny cliche. Non-literate beings have much to teach us. So take that, you word slingers. Now it's my honor to introduce Courtney Lamar of Charleston, who is the author of Telepathologies, selected by D.A. Powell for the 2016 Saturnalia Books Poetry Prize. He was awarded the 2017 Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellowship from the Poetry Foundation, and he has also received fellowships from Cov Conum, did I butcher that, Cov? The Conversation Literary Festival, and the New Jersey State Council on the Arts. His poems have appeared or are forthcoming in Poetry, the American Poetry Review, New England Review, Tri-Quarterly, and elsewhere. He serves as poetry editor at the Rumpus, and he lives in Jersey City. Here's Courtney. Thank you. Sorry.
Good evening. How's everyone doing? Feeling good? Oh, awesome. It's so exciting to be here tonight, to see all of your beautiful faces in this room, to be celebrating the arrival of the newest installment of the Pushcart Prize Anthology Series. There's really a lot that I could say about it. I really don't have the words to express what being here in this moment really means to me, but I'll try to channel that into the reading of the words themselves. I'm not going to preface too much. I'll be moving between the poems, but I will just start by saying that it's kind of a medley I've prepared tonight. Some poems from my first collection, other poems from projects that are ongoing, but I think they're all threaded by very similar concerns, and so I think there will still be a nice arc for you all to follow throughout this reading. I'll start with the first poem I'll start with is the first poem in the collection and the poem that is in the anthology. How do you raise a black child from the dead with pallbearers who are half as young as their faces suggest and twice the oxen they should be, without a daddy at all, or with a daddy in prison, or at home, or in a different home, with a mama, with a grandmama if mama ain't around, maybe even if she is, in a house or not, in the hood, in the suburbs, if you're smart or not afraid of white fear, or even if you are, taking risks, scratching lottery tickets, making big bets on a basketball court, inside a courtroom, poorly in the ever pathological court of opinion, on faith, like a prayer from the belly of a whale, in church on Sunday morning, on Monday, Tuesday, and every other, before school and after, in a school you hope doesn't fail, in a school of thought named for Frederick Douglass, old school or not at all, with hip-hop or without, at least with a little Curtis Mayfield, some Motown, sounds by Sam Cooke, eating that good down-home cooking, putting some wood to their behind, with a switch, with a belt to keep their pants high, not high all the time, on all-time highs, at all times until they learn not to feel and think so lowly of their aims, to be 6 feet tall and not under, with a little elbow grease and some duct tape, sweating bullets on a short leash, away from the big boys on the block, away from the boys in blue, without the frill of innocence, from the dead, again, like a flag. When I grow up, I want to be a martyr, is surely a peculiar answer for any teacher to receive when asking a kindergartner. But on second take, what word best describes me? Crossbreed of butterfly and superfly aesthetics, other than peculiar. I suppose calling me a keen kid would also suffice in explaining my avidity for the kind of death that progresses the narrative of a gentling history, because that's the only frame for greatness I seem to find for boys my shade and age to aspire to, short of having the height and hops to touch the rim, or the bulk and burst to break through the defensive line like a bullet. And no, I haven't given up on the prospect of Bull starting shooting guard yet, but the God-fearer impressed upon me begs the mythology of goodness delivered to the multitudes like loaves and fish. How King is talked about in a Black Christian tradition still in mourning over his lost rays of light. The way mentioning the name of Malcolm makes mice of shady white men some 30 years after the shotgun and he sung of as a prince. I want to evoke that level of pride in American democracy's dark downtrodden because I know what it invokes in me, young and impressionable, watching Denzel's mimicry for the 1,000,000th time in my abbreviated existence, drawing an X on my undeveloped chest, pushing it out into the unknown ahead, hoping a mecca for melanin rises from the man-shaped hole I'd left in my loved ones' lives. I bet my parents would be so proud of me. I bet post offices would close on my birthday. I bet God would dap me up when I got up there and Jesus dying on a cross to meet me. Charleston. For the innocents massacred at Mother Emanuel AME Church. 9 confirmed dead. The blue backlighting from the computer screen underscores their black faces and the rows of teeth therein lit like vigil candles. Tonight, genuflect seems the fool's gambit. I recite their names one by one in the shape of a circle, but I don't receive an acknowledgement in thunder from above. I'm left only with the begging of 2 palms pressed together and the proof it wasn't enough. My body, a stack of mirrors, falls through itself. I am several nouns over the course of descent. Her silver whistle, her public library card, his set of starter hair clippers humming into the darkness with no plugs in a wall. I crash through the gray of the matter, go cleanly through the roof of the church without making a hole, tracing a curious sparrow. But like a holy bird, I land softly on my feet. All the expected ornaments are here, I see. The stained glass windows overlooking the pulpit, and 2 paintings of Christ on the adjacent walls, crucifixion and resurrection, and all 9 of their bodies on the ground, not quite cold. I pick up an annotated student Bible, looking for Jesus' words for Lazarus, but struggle because all the text inside is red, still fresh. I move through the heart of the building, noting the belongings that will house their ghosts. Here are the church fans for Sunday service next to her foot. Here is the sentimental wallet holding the pictures of 2 blossoming girls. Here is a small wooden cross affixed to a ring of keys that could open any of many doors. Here, their scuffed glasses, his navy backpack, his Chicago Bulls snapback, his black and red Sony headphones, familiar looking, looping lyric, Nina, voice strained through wire singing, blood on the leaves, blood on the leaves, blood on the leaves, the bright face of his smartphone jukebox glowing unattended. Missed call, Tyrone. Missed call, Torrance. Missed call, Dominique. Missed call, TJ. I pick up all their many things and lay them in a line at the altar. I find cloth that had been reserved for clergy and choir in a closet close by, draw them over the 6 women, and then the 3 men. I weep, and I weep, and I weep, and I ask the rhetorical question, why? But this time, receive an answer. I'm here to kill black people, he says, standing behind me. I sweat, a bead of blue light. The thunder enters the back of my head and exits my mouth in the manner of prayer. I disperse like a cloud split by lightning, charged electrically by race. I'm erased, surely, completely, gone. Like I wasn't even there. Like I wasn't even there. It's important, I remember, that the moral arc of the universe bends, but it doesn't break, and neither breaks toward justice nor away from it. It simply bends, as the bow does before propelling the arrow where it may, agnostic to everything but flight. I don't mean to make morality a weapon in this way, but it already is one, and has been for some time. The chains, after all, were explained as saving us from ourselves, our naked savagery, though it was their whip that licked us and left a kind of tactile text on our bodies. The Bible will have you laying a beating on someone as easily as it will have you taking one, turning the other cheek, civilly disobedient, even when the bombs blow up in your church. Not to say saying no to violence isn't commendable, just to say a strong case can be made for cracking a skull or 2 like an ordinary egg, in hopes whatever golden light resides inside shines throughs the crimson tide for the rest of time, so the tide will ultimately recede. Elegy for a false sense of security. Tell me how you entered this poem, how you even got in here. Where my parentals come from is where I'm coming from, and where I'm coming from is from, we lock the front door and the back and the side and can't spare a single extra key. Where I'm coming from is from, we shut all the windows tight like our eyes to an ugly view. A jail, if I ever saw one. And maybe I did. And maybe that was enough for me. Maybe you made the mistake by coming here, unannounced, uninvited. It takes a lot of talent to step in someone's crib and be welcome without any alarms going off. So shake your ass something dangerous if you can. Sing me a song real sexy like, or be suck out of luck if I feel like shooting strangers today. If home is where the heart is, then 4 red bullet wounds across the chest of the city's flag say everything there is about my feelings toward you and the whole damn world right now. Because it was my own blood this time, and yet I'm still here. And the funny thing about that town and this one is that they both burned down once. And down the hall, they're burning bud, and I want some kind of sorta, but without the friends. Which makes you foe, I suppose. As if you are the presence of all colors and I am the absence of said colors. But maybe I got it backwards, twisted it all up. It just hurts to have my hair pulled, even if it's by my own hand. My mind is spinning blanks inside every chamber. Everywhere I turn on the TV, they're shooting boys like what I used to be before I wasn't anymore. And when did that happen? And what am I now? Are you the phantom or me? Me or none of the above. The last shadow I cast on a sunny Sunday stole my wallet and bought this gun and all the rounds at the bar too. Where I'm coming from, when in love, squeeze. When lonely, loan yourself some time and don't pay it back. Beware, because I'm both lonely and in love, like the living embodiment of the code switch. I'm polluted air and poisoned water and whatever else they say, except when I say I'm not, and I'm not one to play for a fool for the record. Fear me. I'm godly, and I'm just, and just get the hell out, demon, and do come again. Come again. It's my igneous ire toward you that keeps me a live wire and alive. How do you forgive? Don't squeeze. Ease up on the trigger. Reopen your mouth. Remove the barrel. Mouth the deeper wound with the wound called a mouth. Don't wound whoever is near enough to hear you shatter into tears, sweat, blood, scrap metal. Unload the clip, bullet by bullet, until all of them are accounted for, definitively cold. Disassemble the assault rifle. Take shots of liquor to the chest in rapid fire. Set your heart on fire like a straw man. Have a small change of heart. Find an arrhythmia in the pulse of wrath. Box the shadows and phantoms with a flashlight. Unclench your heart-sized fist. Extend your open hand, palm up like an ironed flat white flag. Politely wave off their apology with your dominant hand. Twist a dish rag like a chicken neck with your bare hands. Clean the house until you can't fathom anything except the color of water. Think clearly. Think within the marrow of God. Bow and bend towards sources of soft light. Be carried lightly inside the womb of a love song. Love something better than you are. Realize it's better to be alone than not be at all. Be bigger than the many, many things that try to kill you dead. Hang pictures of the dead on the wall, though sometimes they harmed you in their practice of love. Wall off certain rooms in the house, but let the house stand. Save stomach for bread's breaking. Eat birds because you believe in becoming what you consume, how the saying goes, more easily through the mind than even fresh air. Believe in a heaven up there equally, if not more, than hell. Remember all the hell you went through in order to survive. survive, and don't tell them sorry. Okay, this is my last poem. Thank you all so much for listening. And then I'll bring up our next reader. Self-portrait. Oh, sorry. Well, I got one more, sorry. I hope you do that again after this poem. Otherwise, I'm going to feel like, uh-oh, like that one wasn't good, but I think it's okay. Self-portrait as a shadow for Lamar. Word is, I wasn't born so much as skimmed off another living thing by a source of light. Let's just say that you are light-skinned, and the back of my mom's hand is a color best worn around the eyes after a knuckles kiss. Though this fact itself is not here to imply I was born of an act of violence, but rather that I was born into violence as a cultural practice and product. And I enter post-crack, post-Reagan, when the big city newspapers sell themselves with headlines about shadow on shadow crime, like light doesn't factor into the equation by definition. Like light doesn't have a gaze upon the world called the day. Fact of the matter is, sad as the matter is, I can only see myself in relation to it, to the light. I can only move in reaction to movement, my ankles shackled to dogma that dogs me and us out from the moment of first appearance. In my case, that's June 1990, summer, maternity ward full of shadows, and from then on, I can only measure love by the amount of nightmares I have in a shortened span of space and simultaneity. They all always say I look like my daddy, which is to frame me a shadow in a related sense, which is to say your presence gives my own life definition, which is what they like to say on TV whenever some kid like me is extinguished too soon. Under the lights, I make do with all this being watched and watched over, and I make questions of it too. And I ask, and you answer, not always well, often incompletely, but completely honest at the same time, and that is how the concept of faith clicks for me. How I learn to perturb politics and push myself into conversations like the connotation of a word or phrase which, too, is a form of shadow, thus a part of me, who upon a lot of light shines that I take advantage of, take care that whenever they flick the switch to turn them on, themselves on, that they'll be sure to see me trailing tightly behind, keeping them on their toes like they've kept me on mine, like you always told me they would. Thank you. Our next reader and Pushcart Prize recipient is Marisa Silver. Marisa, clap it up, clap it up, clap it up. Marisa Silver is the author most recently of the novel Little Nothing, a New York Times Editor's Choice and winner of the Ohioana Book Award for Fiction. Her other novels include Mary Coyne, a New York Times bestseller and winner of the Southern California Independent Booksellers Award, The God of War, No Direction Home, and the story collections Babe in Paradise and Alone with You Silver, is currently the Mary Ellen von der Heyden Fellow at the Dorothy and Louis B. Coleman Center for Scholars and Writers for 2018-2019. In 2017, Marisa Silver was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship for the Creative Arts. So please join me in welcoming Marisa.
Thank you so much. That was really wonderful, those poems. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I've never gotten to read at the Strand, so it's very exciting. I grew up in New York City, so needless to say, this was an iconic place where my family came and spent a lot of time and some money, less money then than now. So thank you for having me. And thank you to the writers room in the Pushcart Prize. So I'm going to read a little bit from Little Nothing, my most recent novel, and which is a sort of surreal, fabulous, and I think in a weird and twisted way, a realistic novel. It takes place in an unnamed village in Eastern Europe in a non-specific time, probably early in the last century. At the story's outset, a child called Pavla is born to a poor elderly couple named Agata and Vaclav, who is the village plumber. Pavla is born, in the parlance of those times, a dwarf. Her parents are initially horrified by her deformity, but they grow to love her, and when she is 15, they realize that once they die, there will be no one to care for her, and her options in the world are limited. No one will marry her, and she may not be able to find work. So they take her to various healers, gypsies, charlatans, and quacks who recommend cures that do not work. Finally, they arrive at the office of Dr. Smetanka and his lowly assistant, Danilo, with hopes that this doctor, with official certificates on the wall, can help them. So this section begins after his initial examination of Pavla. During the ride home, the sky opens up and rain falls heavily. The horse drags the wagon along the muddy roads. Despite that, she is soaked. Agata is talkative. She chatters on about whether she should use paprika on the meat before or after she braises it, and Vaclav, who cares only that food is enough and easy to chew, becomes uncharacteristically engrossed in her culinary dilemma. When the discussion runs its course, Agata breaks into the song the villagers sing at the drowning of Marana festival to herald the end of winter. If Pablo were not thinking about the young man and his lovely, glittering eyes, and if she were not busy trying to remember and interpret his every word and gesture, she would understand the workings of Agata's mind and know which way things were heading for her. When they arrive home, she is happy to be neither suspended from a tree nor made to drink a foul-tasting tea, and she hopes that the doctor has told her parents just to leave her alone. The rain lets up. Vaclav announces that he is going out, but when Pavla offers to help with whatever plumbing job he has going, he tells her not to trouble herself, that he can take care of things on his own. "Let me help you, Mother," Pavla says, as Agata slathers the orange spice over the much-discussed piece of meat. "No, no, darling, you rest." "But I'm not tired." "Of course you're tired after such a long trip." "You took the same trip." "But I'm an old woman, and you're a young girl who needs her rest." "That makes no sense. We should never have sent you to that school if all you're going to talk about is sense." "An idiot could tell you it makes no sense." "Are you calling your mother an idiot?" But before Pavla can defend herself, she hears a familiar sound of metal sinking into earth. She looks out the window and realizes that her father has not gone off to work at all. Instead, he is in the yard, attacking the ground next to her mother's garden with a shovel, grunting and flinging clots of wet dirt behind him onto the chickens that squawk and flap their wings. She wonders if the doctor has told her parents that if they finally install an indoor toilet, she will grow. Luckily, and Pavla will soon discover that this is her single bit of luck, the following morning dawns balmy and gives way to a clear blue sky and clouds so optimistic that they might have been drawn by a child. Vaclav takes Pavla outside and introduces her to the results of his night-long labor, a hole just over a meter deep and wider than any pipe she has ever seen. Pavla gamely scrambles into the pit. When her feet touch bottom, her head barely clears the ground. "Will we tunnel from here to the house?" she says, thinking already about how her father might reconfigure the wardrobe into a water closet. "Shall I draw a map?" He hands her a narrow pipe that is as tall as the pit and into which he has bored 4 small holes at even intervals. It is as useless a pipe for channeling waste as Pavla can imagine. "Tata, I don't think this is what we need." The morning sun glints off the water in his eyes. "I love you, Pavlika," he says, in a voice so sad that she thinks he is dying and that she is standing in his grave. "I love you too, Tata. I only want to give you a good life. I have a good life, the best life." Agata bursts out of the house, running and crying, her hands flailing in front of her face as if she were battling a swarm of bees. "Don't do it," she pleads. "Go back in the house," Vaclav says to his wife. "Don't look." "It's good the way things are," Agata says. "But what about when we are gone? What then?" Pavla is right. Someone is dying. She tries to climb out of the hole, but her arms are too short to lever her weight. "Tata, give me a hand. Get me out of here." "I can't," he says. Tears pour from his eyes and course down the deep runnels that score his cheeks. "Tata, pull me up, just like the enormous turnip. Mother, grab hold of him and pull." "Please take off your clothes, my darling," Vaclav says. What? I don't understand, Pavla says. Don't do it, Agata says, pulling on her husband's arms. I beg of you. Daughter, I'm ordering you to do what I say, he says, trying for an authority that sounds like a pale imitation of the other village patriarchs who yell and berate and hit. But why, Tata, Pavla says? Has she been wrong her whole life? Do her parents wish she had never been born? Are they going to kill her? Take off your clothes. Too shocked to protest or even cry, she pulls her dress over her head. When her mother takes it from her, Pavla grabs onto her hand, and neither will let go of each other until Vaclav gently pries them apart. Don't resist, my darling girl, he says, as a shovelful of dirt rains down on her shoulders. Tata, please, I'll hide. I won't show myself anymore. I won't bring shame on you and Mama. Please, I don't want to die. Dr. Smetanka's prescription, Pavla slowly comes to understand, as the dirt reaches her ankles, and then her knees, and then her chest, is that she and the narrow pipe are to be buried up to her neck. Then, over the hours that she will be so interred, Vaclav and Agata will pour hot oil down the pipe. The oil that emerges through the perforations will slowly seep around her body, and in combination with the moist earth, cause her skin to become elastic. Like toffee, her father says, his mouth struggling to form itself into a smile. You love toffee. The sensation of warm oil reaching her skin is not unpleasant at first. In fact, it is a relief from the clamminess that seeps into her bones. And the infusion of heat seems to put a stop to the nipping chiggers and crawlies that search her body's every fold and pocket for warmth and nutrition. A dumpling, my darling, Agata says. She sits on a stool next to the hole. She gives Pavla water when she is thirsty and food when she is hungry. She sings and tells stories, and she holds up old school books so that Pavla can read, turning the pages when Pavla indicates that she is ready. If you don't eat your meal, Agata says, when Pavla refuses the food, you can't have dessert. As if they are sitting at supper after an uneventful day, as if mothers all over the village routinely plant their children in the ground to make them grow. But Pavla is too exhausted and confused by what is happening to protest. She wonders if her mother has gone mad and crossed over into the world of her imagination, and whether Pavla has not simply become a character in a story where goblins steal children and grotesque crones turn into beautiful princesses, stories her mother tells herself when she stares out the window of the cottage, no longer certain of the contours of her life. Pavla's skin begins to burn. The next time Vaclav and Agata administer a round of treatment, the oil, once as comforting as the infusion of boiled water into a tepid bath, touches raw skin. Pavla shrieks for Agata, who in turn shrieks for Vaclav, who tries to be forceful, telling each of them not to cry, but he is weeping too. Pavla begs and pleads, and he cries out for her forgiveness, and the three of them compose a trio of wails so furious that the neighborhood dogs yowl in response. And then suddenly, with no warning, the pain seems to slice right through her bones, so that not only is her skin aflame, but her insides feel as if they have been struck by lightning. She cannot cry. She cannot speak. She cannot even think beyond the suffering. Her mind recalculates, and determining pain to be its new equilibrium, adjusts itself accordingly, shutting down all her other faculties in order to not disrupt the sensation in any way. Then something astonishing happens. The pain becomes so total, so obliterating that anything corporeal and sensate buries itself deeply in her center, and she perceives it as virtually non-existent. She feels like nothing so much as, well, her schoolmates were right all along. She feels like nothing. It is dawn, and Vaclav is frantic, even praying to God he doesn't care for, as he shovels earth from around her. Agata is on her knees, clawing the dirt like a dog, crying, "Are you dead, my Pavla? Is she dead?" Vaclav throws down the shovel and pulls his daughter from the hole, then carries her to his wagon. She faints during the ride. When she wakes, she is lying on Dr. Smetanka's examining table, except it isn't the same table she was on before. This table is rough-hewn and the edges are raw. She can already feel splinters sliding underneath her skin. But she doesn't mind the smell, which is sweet like wet leaves or fresh-cut firewood. Also, and this is the strangest thing of all, a crank is affixed to one side. She is so bewildered by everything that has happened and is happening that it takes her a few extra moments to realize that her ankles are pinned down by straps and that the doctor's assistant is in the process of lifting her arms over her head and fitting her wrists into another set of immobilizing leathers. She is naked beneath a sheet, and when the material shifts even the smallest bit, she feels as if her skin is being ripped off. She gasps, "Mama," but she doesn't say it because she can't make her voice work. Once she is secured to the doctor's satisfaction, the assistant comes around to the side table. She tries to catch his gaze to reaffirm their connection, but he will not look at her. Begin, the doctor says. The assistant turns the crank, and Pavla feels a space open up underneath her. The table seems to be splitting in two, and as she is pulled northward and southward, what begins as a tug becomes a pull, and then the pressure in her armpits and around her hips and groin become unbearable. She has to make it stop. She forces a sound out of her, but the noise she makes is nothing like her voice. It is low and raw, more animal than girl. The assistant stops. He looks at her for the first time that day. His beautiful eyes are filled with terror. Danilo, keep going, the doctor orders. Danilo, she tries to say the name to make her appeal, but she can't. I don't think, Danilo says. Who is the doctor here? As the space between the two halves of the table widens, it feels like her arms and legs are being ripped out of their sockets, and as her body stretches, so too her mind undergoes an expansion. Pavla is on the table, being pulled in opposite directions, while another Pavla stands next to Danilo, watching as he slowly turns the crank. The distance between her two selves feels immeasurable. It could be only a couple of meters, or it could be by a scale larger by hundreds. Or perhaps the measurements are insufficient, and the distance must be calculated in days or even years. In fact, she is not certain that there is distance because she no longer feels she is in a place with the sort of assurance she normally feels when she can sense the boundaries of her bed, her home, the walk to town, even the distance between her village and the ones her parents have taken her to in an effort to cure her. There they are, cowering in the corner, horrified by what they are witnessing, and yet they do nothing to stop it. She wonders who they are, these people who she loves, who she believed would protect her. As the Pavla on the table feels her muscles stretch to their limit, the Pavla standing next to Danilo feels another kind of dislocation, for she is no longer certain who she is. The world has become suddenly enormous. It not only includes the girl on the table, but it also includes the girl who is watching the girl on the table, and if this is true, it must also include another girl watching that girl, and on and on. Stop it, she hears, although she does not know who is speaking, if it is Danilo, her father, or her mother, or herself. The words spread out around her, invade her ears, her mouth, until it seems as if the sound becomes her, and then the noise is so thick in her ears that she can't even hear it. All that is left is silence. Thank you. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Oliver de la Paz, who is the author of 4 books of poetry, Names of Bub Houses, Furious Lullaby, Requiem for the Orchard, and Post Subject, A Fable. His new book, The Boy in the Labyrinth, is forthcoming in the summer of 2019 and will be published by the University of Akron Press. He is a founding member of Kundiman, where he serves as the co-chair of the advisory board, and he teaches English at Holy Cross and in the low residency MFA program at Pacific Lutheran University. Oliver de la Paz.
Good evening. How are you? Oh, I know you. It's good to see you. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you so much. Thanks to Bill Henderson for all the work that you've been doing all over the years, and Andrea Marcusa and Philip Schultz for their work with the Writer Studio, The Strand, and Poetry Magazine, who first published the poem that is featured in Pushcart. I'm going to read from my forthcoming manuscript, The Boy in the Labyrinth. And I'll start with the poem that was published in Pushcart. Thing that you should know, I am the father of 2 sons on the autism spectrum. And the poem was inspired, informed, in argument with a particular questionnaire that many parents who have children who are neurodiverse had to fill out. And the manuscript, The Boy in the Labyrinth, is mostly about my quarrel with the language of medicine and the language of, ableists like myself, and my own flaws and my own imperfections and my own misunderstandings. You'll hear 2 voices. One is the voice of the questionnaire, and one is the voice of a neurotypical parent answering the questionnaire. Autism screening questionnaire. speech and language delay. Did your child lose acquired speech? A fount, and then silence. A nun, an ellipse between, his breath through the seams of our windows. Whistle of days. Impossible bowl of a mouth, the open cupboard, vowels rounded up and swept under the rug. Does your child produce unusual noises or infantile squeals? He'd coo, and we'd coo back. The sound passed back and forth between us like a ball, or later, an astral voice, some vibrato under the surface of us. The burst upon, burn of strings rubbed in a flourish, his exhausted face. Is your child's voice louder than required? In an enclosure or a cave, it is difficult to gauge one's volume, the proscenium of the world. All the rooms we speak of are dark places. Because he cannot see his mouth, he cannot imagine the sound that comes out. Does your child speak frequent gibberish or jargon? To my ears, it is a language. Every sound, a system. The sound for dog or boy. The moan in his throat for water. That of a man with thirst. The dilapidated ladder that makes a sentence a sentence. This plosive is a verb. This liquid, a want. We make symbols of his noise. Does your child have difficulty understanding basic things, just can't get it? Against the backdrop of a tree, he looks so small. Does your child pull you around when he wants something? By the sleeve, by the shirt tail. His light touch hopscotching against my skin like sparrows, an insistence muscled and muscled again. Does your child have difficulty expressing his needs or desires using gestures? Red-faced in the kitchen and in the bedroom, and the yellow light touches his eyes, which are open but not there. His eyes rest in their narrow boat dream, and the canals are wide, dividing this side from this side. Is there no spontaneous initiation of speech or communication from your child? When called, he eases out of his body. His God is not our words, nor is it the words from his lips. It is entirely body. So when he comes to us and looks, we know there are beyond us impossible cylinders where meaning lives. Does your child repeat heard words, parts or words, or television commercials? The mind circles the mind in the arena, far in where the consonants touch and where the round chorus flaunts its iambs in a metronomic trot, humming to himself in warm and jugular songs. Does your child use repetitive language, the same word or phrase over and over? A pocket in his brain worries its ball of lint. A word clicks into its groove and stammers along its track, Dopplering like a car with its windows rolled down. And the one top hit of the summer angles its way into his brain. Does your child have difficulty sustaining a conversation? We could be anywhere. Then the navel of the red moon drops its fruit. His world, this stained world, drips its honey into our mouths, our words stolen from his malingering afternoon. Does your child use monotonous speech or wrong pausing? When the air is true and simple, we can watch him tremble for an hour, plucking his meaning from a handful of utterances, and then ascend into the terrible partitions of speech, Does your child speak the same to kids, adults, or objects? You can't differentiate. Because a reference needs a frame. We are mother and father and child with a world of time to be understood. The car radio plays its one song. The song, therefore, is important. It must be intoned at a rigorous time because rigor is important and because the self insists on constant vigils. Does your child use language inappropriately, wrong words or phrases? Always. And he insists on the incorrect forms. The wrong word takes every form for love. The good tree leans into the pond. The gray dog's ribs show. The memory bound to the window and the promise of the radio playing its song on the hour. Every wrong form is a form which represents us in our losses, if it takes us another world to understand. And the last piece that I'm going to be reading is also from The Boy in the Labyrinth. It's just a short sequence. The boy in the labyrinth remembers drums, noise ricocheting from the skin into his chest, how his basket of ribs felt his heart spin around, a windmill path. Against the noise, he had stood with his eyes closed as his breath throttled out of him. The shape of his body seemingly squeezed out of the circle of his mouth, and in the void, without any other sound or light, the pulse of blood from behind his ears becomes the footsteps of his interruption. The face that is the hole at the center of the boy, its leaving face, its God face, the beast in his most glorious heft, moves his lungs forward. He listens to the keen sound of water droplets strike their tinny notes. His tympanic membrane devours the sound wave. A drop from a goblet spilled to a sponge. Other sounds. Keratin scratched against limestone, sparks from fur brushed against the outcroppings, even the smallest click of teeth against the impossible seed misplaced here in the dark, even the heartbeat, especially the heartbeat from deep within his throat. The boy doesn't call it fear. He doesn't call it anything, just a feeling that starts as small as a child's red cup held close to his chest, cradled, warmed by the heart's lambent engine. Rather than a cup, could it be a bird, a rook, all wayward and shuddering, wild-eyed in the dark wineskin of the boy's body? Or is this pulse no pulse at all, but an expectation, like the company pain keeps, like the half-man, half-bull running the length of his paddock, wondering about the symmetry of his horns and the weight he bears? Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce the next reader, and he has a very short bio for all of his accomplishments. Rick Moody is the author of 6 novels, 3 collections of stories, a book of essays on music, and 2 volumes of memoir, including the forthcoming work, The Long Accomplishment. Please welcome Rick Moody.
This has been a really powerful reading tonight. I think it's sort of a testament to Bill's taste. And I've been honored to be in the Pushcart Prize Anthology a couple other times, many years ago. And I'm always delighted and feel great pride in being included in this book, which I read with great avidity as a younger writer, and I still do every year. Read it with the same excitement and joy of discovery. So my story is also it's a heartbroken story, and it's a deeply nasty bit of business, so I warn you in advance. And I'm just going to read the beginning, and then I'm going to read the very end. And I apologize for the nastiness, but you'll figure out why. A country scene. The meth heads, if that is the correct designation, had been watching the house for months. Agreed, this presumes the meth heads had their shit together enough to watch anything at all beyond NASCAR or Alaska State Troopers. Their hard, rural lives mainly involved sleeping in for days at a time in the extremity of despond, because that was what it felt like when the pollutants evacuated the relevant neurotransmitters. If they were methamphetamine users rather than users of, for example, crack cocaine, there is greater likelihood of transitory psychosis, ischemic events, seizure, and paralysis. Any of these side effects would have prevented the perps from effectively watching the house. And yet there's no conclusion but that they were, because they tiptoed onto the premises, according to the neighbors, double-checking to see if it could be done before going in big with a pickup and hand tools. Did they start watching the house after they were rebuffed in their attempt to snow shovel the driveway for cash on one occasion? 9 months prior, the owner of the house was out in the driveway, and the meth heads slowed down on the way past from their own hovel, a couple of houses down, where most of a decaying fir tree rested on the roof and a partially disassembled television was snow-covered in the yard. And they asked if the owner needed help shoveling, which he declined, citing good exercise. The meth heads may have illegally procured a snowblower that they were hoping to use as a revenue generator throughout the neighborhood. We can imagine their contempt for the owner as he lifted each wet, intractable shovelful of precipitation, when more practical methods were for a paltry sum being offered to achieve a like result. Maybe they wanted a closer look at the premises while shoveling, as they waited for a climatically advantageous period, a period in which the owner of the house would no longer be likely to visit so frequently as he did in summer. It was, after all, his second home. And so the meth heads decided upon October, right after the birthday of the owner. They did not break in during a birthday celebration during the eating of gluten-free chocolate made from a box. Among the questions pursuant to the crime, including wondering whether the perpetrators were beaten as children, was the question of whether they were observing through the windows during the 2-day birthday celebration. Was candle extinguishing observed? Conjugal activity? Excretory episodes? And did they try the patio door with their crowbar before the burglary? As to the further question, the one you are about to ask, it is likely that they were high during the heist, because otherwise they would not have been quite as gleefully merciless as they turned out to be. They had already driven into the driveway per the testimony by the closest but one neighbor, and then turned around and gone back down to the falling down hovel. They knew it could be done, this breaking and entering. They fired up beforehand to kindle in themselves the hardness required for felonious activity, and then they drove on up the driveway, pulled the car in a bit so that anyone passing by would not think about it much. They didn't stop to admire the view from the yard. They went around back. They leaned on the patio door, a French door of a certain kind, and they quickly overcame the French door in order that they could be, in earnest, lawless, upcountry sons of liberty. In short order across the threshold, the meth heads came to feel that all in the house belonged to them. The door swung back, and to the meth heads, it was like the first time they non-consensually abridged the freedoms of etc., etc. The prevailing order of things in which, by and large, you leave to other people their ideas about property and ownership was overturned, and the appurtenances of the house were theirs. However, achieving the threshold of the premises also leads us to an important metaphysical question, one that is implicit in breaking and entering in the majority of cases, and that metaphysical question is, having had their quiet enjoyment of the premises, would they shit on the bed? Whichever bed. For many lawless upcountry sons of liberty, this was a traditional part of the breaking and entering game. It was part of the folk literature of breaking and entering, a culmination even. And though they had performed just the 4 or 5 burglaries in the eastern Dutchess County area, they were well aware that shitting on the bed was practically de rigueur. According to their natures, they knew. They were pondering shitting on the bed while they turned off the electricity at the fuse box and with flashlights began emptying closets and drawers of wearable items, looking for the baubles that could be presented to any unscrupulous pawnbroker. Throughout it all, there was a certain pressure upon the collective bowel of the team. On the second floor, they were laughing and belittling the possessions of the former owners of the house, especially possessions that indicated the undeniable vulnerability of the owners. For example, striped socks or women's undergarments. This stuff was ridiculous to them. The signs of vulnerability were ridiculous. And the more laughably vulnerable, the more they felt powerfully the need to shit on the bed, while looking at, for example, a drawer full of boxer shorts. Shitting on the bed is considered a reasonable activity in few theaters of human conduct, because this posture would require one burglar to allow another to see him crouch. And yet, which criminal has not wanted to feel so utterly liberated, so American, on the king bed of some interloper from the city whose crime is that he pays property taxes into a district where he does not use the services? Why not shit on the bed of a person like that? Why not evacuate last night's microwavable meat product and hot sauce through the alimentary passageway onto the comforter? It would be so satisfying. As the minutes passed and the adrenaline and amphetamine combination settled down into a steady state, so that the meth heads, they were 3, one a convicted felon and 2 younger guys he had impressed with promises of riches and prescription drugs in abundance, were no longer quite so nervous. With their flashlights wobbling, they considered in the master bedroom pieces of jewelry that were not self-evidently worthless in the light of the flash lamp. Just take it. We'll figure it out later. The dressers in the master bedroom were emptied entirely, spilled out on the floor, and in these drawers they found the heirlooms that were hidden in sock balls and among lacy undergarments. Who would put jewelry in the sock drawer when everybody knows to look in the sock drawer? Man, these people who owned this house were fucking dumb. And they deserve to be robbed, because if you're this naive, you deserve to be robbed. They thought they were so smart, these rich city fuckers who owned this house, they actually put jewelry in the sock drawer, which is fucking stupid. And there's no fucking alarm wired into the house, which is fucking stupid. And people like the meth heads could just fucking waltz in here, and if they wanted to shit on the bed, the 3 of them chortling about it, they could just shit on the bed. All right, now I'm going to read you the ending. Questions for further study. 1. How is class a particular feature of the burglary at the heart of a country scene? 2. Is it possible to write a story in which there are no conventionally sympathetic characters? Is the narrator sympathetic? 3, what is the symbolism of shitting on the bed? Is it an example of the gift economy? 4, have you or anyone you know been the subject of a violent crime? 5, would you be able to be impartial if impaneled on a jury to consider the protagonists of this work? 6, does this work of fiction imperil due process should the perpetrators come to be apprehended in the matter of this crime? 7, is it possible for the perpetrators of this burglary who took, for example, the ring I proposed to my wife with, to commit these crimes without ever undertaking to feel the loss that the violated party feels? 8, how can I go on doing my work when the place where I did my work was the setting of this country scene? That is, a place defiled by these guys and made more their home than mine. Thank you. And now let me introduce Thylias Moss. Thylias Moss, prize-winning multiracial maker who has won a number of awards beginning in 1983 with a poem for which she won $25. Since then, she has authored a total of 15 books, most of which have won awards, notably a MacArthur Genius Fellowship, and 2 finalist awards from the National Book Critics Circle. She will be featuring 2 books, Slave Moth, written by a literate slave girl, Varl, a collection that necessitated her making the dress on the cover by hand in the Dark, after a visit to her son's middle school, and a new collection entirely collaborative, Shawsheen Memorial Broom Society, written with, for, and to her collaborators, Mr. Anstead Moss, her son, and Mr. Bob Holman, her thing written in text messages with him based around her Pushcart Prize-winning poem, Blue Coming, also written in collaboration with him. Please welcome Phyleus Moss.
Here is the poem that I wrote with Bob Holman, Blue Coming. Poetry is connected to the body, part of my fingertips, just as blue as anything that ever was or will be blue. Blue that dye aspires to, true blue, denied to any sapphire, Logan sapphire included, even if she wears some of the on those.
Could you say it into the mic?
Oh.
I'm having trouble hearing.
Okay, is this better? Yes. All right, I'm not going to start over. I will just continue. Blue that dye aspires to, true blue, denied to any sapphire, Logan sapphire included, even if she wears some on those blue fingers. Blue spreads, consumes her, as if she hatched from an Araucana egg. She is blue, fingers blue as hands ever, Tunisian blue, Durban blue hands, shoulders, breasts, every nook and cranny blue. Big Bad Wolf says, how blue you are, the better to blue you. She, so blue today, visits offices of the National Enquirer to report on this surging blue epidemic. Blue bottle blue, fly bluer than any sound buzzing, fly buzzing as blue as it can, making the blues mean something very different. Such music from beating of wings, some of what has spread blue throughout her bluing body. Blue buzz, even layers of atmosphere. Blue buzz, name of a new Crayola crayon and marker manufactured from her fingertips. Blue buzz blood group, she bleeds an orgasmic paint set. She bleeds a blue layer, her lover's face becoming blue. She's dreaming of, again, blue as his face that defines blue for her. Blue orgasm. So much blue everywhere. World become blue for her. Story of this massive bluing, true story on the cover of papers, turning blue once in her atmosphere. Blue static, blue stuttering, blue hands, blue code blue, coming together. What a mighty tincture. Not exactly at the same time, but coming. Connected. Her coming, her fingertips writing a blue coming. And now, just a poem or two from what will be my new collection of poetry. It is called Shawsheen Memorial Broom Society. And it is a collection of poetry by me, my son, Mr. Anstead Moss, my thing, Mr. Bob Holman, and if you know me on Facebook, you'll see that, and her stuffed animal, Laciel. Laciel was really an elephant, a white elephant, but when I was in the hospital almost dead, my son brought me this stuffed animal, and that helped me come back. When he brought me the stuffed animal, he said my head would move to any sound in the hospital, even the call bell for the nurse, so that's when he said he knew I was in there. And then, you see, because I was incorrigible, you know, I would just get up and wander the hospital corridors, but once he could come see me, he could sign me out, and then we wandered all over the place. And what got me out of that hospital? I wrote 2 prose poems, because as we wandered about, with permission with him, we found a library, and I wrote 2 prose poems. What were they called? Whatever they were called. Anyway, that's why they released me, because they couldn't do anything with me. Well, most people couldn't. Okay. So, all right. So most of these, I'm going to read just 1 or 2 of them. Let me jump. I truly did write these in text messages to that man. I would write a text message to him, and then I would write a few lines, and he would write a few more, and I would write a few more, and he would write a few more. That's exactly what happened. And then suddenly I said, oh, this is a book. Okay, now what do I want to read? What do you want to hear? But you don't know these poems. Normally I would do that. Let's just see what's here. Shawsheen Devonian Conversion. I was in such a downpour, some sort of Devonian conversion. It seemed sleeve of my jacket was soaked to the point that next events would be shedding fingernails that would attach themselves in an overlapping daisy chain effect of scales perfect for a glittery greeting card edge that could be used to shave off stubble in a pinch. I do not know what one is supposed to think of under such circumstances when one does not mean to take a bath nor a dunking to catch some witchcraft craft brew on my breath, too busy remembering you. Witchcraft epidemic, rickety pulpit high chairs and rows on Shawshank banks. Ritualized dunkings, walking on water is one holy thing, but to sink could prove devilishly, or to float did the same. Either way, once identified as probable witch you were. And yet, my father kept bottles of Red Devil hot sauce throughout the kitchen. Every shelf and cranny had a little Red Devil poking out, spicing up an otherwise dreary life. I chose to flirt with temptation, actually jitterbugging with it. Them, the whole singing group, also. Little Red Devil liquid spotting their retractable snaky tongues, even in an exceptional kitchen my mother constantly debugged, itself all red with bloody sunsets, red bloodshot eyes. Also, when one wrestled demons all night, those succubi and mass hysteria, women were given to them, just as some of us were handed over to men who meant us no good at all. Those 40 years were as Noah's, that's my marriage, 40 days in an ark relying on witchcraft to stay afloat, two of everything to assure potentials for procreations, wide variety of fulfillment, pleasure being the one of them not overtly emphasized. Indeed, sex itself was pleasing a man. But no one cared about reversals that occurred in choir rehearsals. Power is power. We also had bottles of mercurochrome, also red, but an antiseptic mercurial compound and germicide when in its red solution. The only key worked in chemistry, physics, and in bakery, those fancy red icings that made you want to sink your teeth in. Real tight bites made it easier for you to be reeled in to a Bible page. Red letter edition, words of a deity, take your pick of the litter. Mercurochrome edge lettering, good as gold leaf that could peel right off. Wounded trees on their bended knees, slashed with their own branches, bloody from praying. Dark tones prevailing, maybe because it is dead of night. I have never been known to be ghoulish until now. From watching too much Ghoulardi with my father, I suppose. His birthday is in August, maybe a head start. Many a Capuchin have August birthdays also. No big deal. I do not know, only that Ghoulardi featured monster flicks, terabytes in those films, some atomic trilobite gone haywire, gargantuan proportions, or BYTE, if occurring in technological aging as we do. The old ICBMs may be too old to do their nuking job. Yes, geniuses paved the way, splitting atoms as easily as some pop chewing gum. I could never do that professionally, although for a talent show. There was a group of 7th grade gum poppers popping juicy fruit and tap dancing to popular songs of the 60s my mother wouldn't let me listen to. It wasn't religious, just seductive. Unless that was your witchy religion, those women shouting, hoping to be picked by that handsome single Jesus. You will recall I had to write about certain good devilment with you by calling you Jesus. So if my mother saw it, she would think I was only talking about the Savior who could turn her skin white as snow. That's true. Bleaching.
We're going to have to end soon.
I'm going to just finish this poem.
Finish the poem, please.
Yeah.
There's a book signing.
That's fine. Okay, 99 and 44, 100%. Pure ivory, elephant tusk, wheat trusk. Just long enough to remember fiery little red devil furnace picture shows. Now playing because that knowledge emerges. I once was good with string art except for tangles. I couldn't get enough of those, wondering why and how. Dancing cobras fail to tie themselves up in knots, NOTS. Why, right in pure Swami faces, orange glowing with the best Nemo sunsets. Thank you so much.